I know we've only known each other for 4 weeks and 3 days, but to me, it seems like 9 weeks and 5 days.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Sunday edition of the Let's Get Growing show. I'm Enoch. I'm your host today, and we've got a really great show for you here today. It is the third Sunday of the month, so that means it's time for our monthly gardening book club. And this month's gardening book club, we are featuring this really great book by Thor Hansen, The Triumph of Seeds. This is just a really awesome book, and I can't wait to talk to Thor here in just a little bit later on in the show. So stay tuned as we'll also have our good friend, Mr. MBC, joining with us as our co-host today. And in just a few minutes for our In the Garden segment as well, too. So right on, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining with us here today. And as you know, right at the top of the show, let's go ahead and click that like button, hit that thumbs up, as well as subscribe, hit the bell notification to be notified of all of our upcoming videos and live streams right here on the Urban Gardener channel. And definitely share with all your friends. Let them know about the Let's Get Growing show in the Urban Gardener channel. The Let's Get Growing show here is every Saturday and Sunday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 2 p.m. Eastern, and that's 7 p.m. in the evening for all of you over in the UK as well, too. So thank you all so much for joining with us here today, and especially those of you who are joining with us on the replay. Thank you so much for taking your time to check out what we've got growing on here on the show today. Like I said, it's going to be a really great show. Love to hear from all of you. Drop down into the comments and let me know you're here. Let me know what you got growing on. If you got any suggestions for the show, or if you just want to drop by and say hi, I'd love to hear from all of you. And questions or comments for our guests here today. If you're joining with us live, drop into our chat as well. Just drop in and say hi too. And everybody would love to hear from you. And if you do have any questions for our guests here today, put those in big, bold, capital letters so that I can see the questions from the regular conversation. And we can try to make sure we get those fit into our discussion today with our guests. And also follow all of our links down below to all of our guests and Urban Gardener social media. And come and check us out there and go and support our guests as well, too. Right on. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here today. At the top of the show, a couple of things to talk about here. If you didn't get a chance, anyways, I say we're here every Saturday and Sunday. I just got to mention we weren't here yesterday, though, too. We had a great little open chat, though, too, which again, too, I want to say thank you to all of you who did participate in the open chat yesterday, even though we didn't have a show officially yesterday. I love coming in there later on and checking out and seeing what everybody says and talks about and all of that. And the conversation is practically just as lively and as fun as it is on any other regular show day. So thank you all so much for helping us build such a great community here and participating in the open chat. Also did want to mention too here at the top of the show again, we've kind of gone through some things over the last month here on the show and kind of getting ourselves reset and redone. Hopefully, again, too, as we're continuing to move forward, we're back on track with where we were a little bit over a month ago, and everything just kind of shut down and broke down, and we had just a convolution of so many different things happening here that ultimately I had to reach out to all of you guys and ask for some support. And we've been doing kind of a little bit of an audience fundraiser over the last several weeks or so to try to kind of help pay for some computer equipment that we needed to keep this show going here. And so for all of those of you who have donated already and have helped contribute either through our super chat chats here through YouTube or through some of our direct donations. We do have links down below too as well to our PayPal, Venmo, Cash App if you guys would like to continue to contribute to the show and help donate to keep us going here. We just got just a little bit more to go. I'd say just a little, out of about $800 it was going to take to do this. I'm really, really just, so thankful for the support that you've all given and everything. We are only really about $100 away from being able to take care of everything as far as taking care of that. And the very, very awesome person who came forward to help us get right back on track and everything too. So we want to make sure we take care of them. They're such a huge supporter of our show in this way. So I want to make sure we can get back to them. So if you do have any ability, and if you don't, please do not worry about it. Don't even think about it. Your biggest support for this show is just being here and participating and doing all the free things like we talk about at the beginning, clicking that thumbs up, getting into the comment section and leaving comments, sharing with your friends. These are all free, really awesome ways that you can support the show. And if you're doing that sort of stuff already, thank you so much. But if you do have a few extra dollars to donate, definitely please drop down into the description below there for some of those other ways to donate, or jump in and throw in a super chat or so as well too throughout the conversation. We're always open for that as well too. So again, thank you so much everybody for all you've done to help keep Let's Get Growing going. Right on. And also too, let's see here. I know I wanted to mention something else as far as what we've got growing on here today. But I can't seem to see what exactly it was, but maybe I'll get to it here in just a little bit later. I hope all of you guys have had been having a great time in your gardens lately. Hope everything's growing really well for you all. I'm out here just trying right now. We've been dealing with just a couple of heat waves again here in Southern Oregon. So again, I'm just trying to get my plants surviving through some of this, really hot part of the summer. And definitely there's some plants that are definitely worn down from it a little bit, but we're doing our best to keep things hydrated is the biggest part. We just got to make sure that they've got plenty of water in their soil, and so that they can keep those leaves going throughout the day. You see those things start to limp down a little bit, they're getting thirsty and they're needing a little bit to get themselves through the rest of the day. And as I always say too, definitely, if you see that, get out there and get some water and go, and don't worry about whether it's the middle of the day or not. A lot of people say out there that you shouldn't water in the middle of the day during the heat of the day and all of that. But if your plants are thirsty, let's get some water in that soil for them. Definitely do that. Right on, everybody. Thank you for being here. And let's see who we got here in the chat real quick here. Of course, we want to say hi to our good friend Jay Dixon joining us from Midwestern Ontario, Canada, our facilitator of the show. And everybody keep an eye out for Jay's links and further information on some of the subjects and things that we're talking about through the show. And if you do have any small channels out there, one of the things we love to do around here is to give some shout outs for all of you small channels out there. Let us know you got a small channel, and Jay will get us a link right into that chat there so that everybody can go and show you some support and get over there and give you some subscriptions and comments and all that sort of stuff, the things that we love to do around here supporting our community. Right on. Let's see, Leslie, thank you for being in here. Let's see, MKP, can't wait for another great show. Yeah, this is a good one. I'm telling you, our book today is really, really awesome. You guys are going to really enjoy this conversation here today. Guten Gardening with us. Hello. How you doing, Kevin? Thanks for joining with us here today. And of course, our good friend and the moderator, Adam Burley, joining us from right up the road in Central Point. Right on. Thanks, Adam, for joining us. Let's see here. Okay, I want to make sure we get in here. Oh, I see Bowtie is in the conversation as well, too. Good to see you. Bowtie. Excellent, excellent, everybody. Thank you so much for being here and joining us for the show here today. Um, yeah, we got lots and lots going on here today. Let's see here. And as you know, every Sunday, what we do here is start off our show with a great segment we call In the Garden. Well, one of the great things about the third Sunday of the month is that our In the Garden segment is a live segment because our good friend, Mr. MBC, is here to join with us live to be a co-host for our monthly gardening book club. But we also got to catch up what's going on in the garden. So, all right, everybody, let's welcome our good friend, Mr. MBC.
Hey, everybody. Great to be
Colbert.
back today. Loving this book, loving this topic, loving this meditation on seeds. So timely.
Yeah, exactly. We're all out there. I know I just harvested a bunch of my lettuce seeds. I had a couple of different varieties of lettuce I let go to seed. So, I went and got all the little puffy tops and everything and put them into my Ziploc bag, and I'm shaking them up. And I got a bunch of really good seed here for this fall and this next spring season as well.
No, this is an exciting time, and I'm glad you mentioned that because definitely one of the tasks that I'm doing in the garden is making sure to collect some of that seed. I've just collected a bunch of cilantro seed, got a bunch of parsley seed to collect, huge amounts of Swiss chard seed. I mean, I can't believe how much seed that those plants make if you let them go.
Isn't it amazing?
Oh my God. I mean, it's just like Swiss chard is outrageous. I'm also collecting some flower seeds, and maybe this is something we'll talk about later on today, but some of this seed, we talked about there's seed banking and how you store seed properly, even in your home. I like to store some of the seed just in the soil. Like my first gathering, like I was going past some cosmos the other day, and I noticed they're little spiky, their seeds are nice and spiky, and they shoot up from the flower base. So I just pulled all those, and I'm just tossing them willy-nilly in the garden. So the first round of seed that I'm saving, I'll save some indoors for next year as a guarantee that I have it. But I like to just throw a bunch of these seeds in the garden and let them just grow up where they will and when they're ready.
Yeah, I've got in fact I've got some of these cherry tomatoes right here. This is a variety that I like to grow called Prax cherry tomatoes. Really delicious.
Yeah, that's your favorite.
And what I do though is I grow them in this part of my garden there, and being a heirloom open pollinated variety, I just let some of those big juicy nice ones, and I know I let the big nice ones go, but you know what I mean, but I let them just ripen right on that plant until they fall right off into the ground, and then I let them do their whole thing and just go right into the ground and everything. And each year they come back up, and I have new ones growing from basically trying to do some of that, I don't know if it's necessarily land race or adaptation gardening, in that sense, but just kind of the idea of just allowing things to volunteer and get stronger with each season as these plants are, strengthening their genetics for that particular growing space.
Yeah, it's like it sort of challenges the conventional wisdom too, in that we all think we've got to be starting our tomato seeds indoors and that they have this long growing season and they'll never make it to fruiting if we don't start them indoors months ahead of time. But some of these varieties, especially the small ones, the cherries and even the smaller fruited ones, the currant tomatoes and such, these things are just they'll make it on their own. They'll germinate on their own. They'll totally grow outdoors. And sometimes you don't have to do a thing. So when we have these kind of crops, it's just a huge advantage because it's like somebody just took a load off your plate. So you don't have to worry about the Prax cherry tomato anymore.
Right.
I don't have to worry about there's so many things, like even up at the rooftop garden, that just grow on their own now. Certain nasturtiums are like a weed. I'm constantly weeding them out. There's too many. I don't even want them.
That's calendula for me. I grew those one year for calendula, and I got them all over every year now.
but it's marvelous. I'd rather be weeding out things that I could let grow if I
Mm-hmm.
chose to than things like crabgrass or things that are really going to be competing with my crops. So that's kind of a marvelous way to garden. It's just
Yeah.
letting things do their thing, and you're just sort of tending to it lightly and spreading seeds around a little bit here and there.
Yeah, and kind of an advantage of like a nasturtium calendula or these sort of things that are going to be like a weed and popping up and growing everywhere is that, yeah, we got to pull them and kind of treat them as a weed for all the excess we don't really want in our garden. But because they're popping up everywhere, we can kind of have them where we want them, right? And they can
Yeah.
be volunteers popping up and keeping the ones where we want them in our garden versus, growing something from seed in a pot and bringing it into the garden and planting it out, right? We got them
Yes.
just growing on their own now, and getting that strength of a volunteer, but being able to have them in the garden space where we like them.
Well, here's an amazing discovery, amazing to me. I've eaten the flowers of borage. Hopefully people know what borage is.
Yeah.
Um, it's a fast growing plant that produces these gorgeous blue and white and sometimes pinkish flowers that bees love.
Mm-hmm.
The flowers, the actual 5-petaled flower is delicious, tastes like a cucumber. But up until now, I've avoided the leaves. I've grown them as microgreens when the very first leaves come out. But then as the true leaves emerged, they're hairy and they can actually irritate your skin a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
What I learned is if you cook those things down, the hairs go all the way and it creates a delicious greens that you can eat. So I've been mixing it with kale. It is sublime with kale, I got to say. So as I'm doing my weeding out in the garden, I'm pulling out all this borage. I just put it in a little pile, bring it indoors, saute it up with kale leaves and a little bit of onion.
Mm-hmm.
It is delicious. So I'm literally eating the weeds this year. It's great.
I know. It's again coming back to our first book, right? What we could forage out there and what we could get, weeds or whatever, it don't matter.
Exactly, right. And we're
things are
really
pretty
letting
tasty.
the plants lead the way in certain ways and just reducing the effort it takes to be a gardener. I mean, if these things are just going to come up on their own, that's easy.
Yeah, exactly. So right on, man. We are. We're in the garden right now. How things growing for you out there? You mentioned the rooftop garden. I think last time we saw you for our in the garden segment this last week, you were up there showing us some squash and tomatoes and all of that. How's the whole garden going up there?
Well, yeah. Oh, it's going great. Last time I think we were focusing on just really pruning things and expanding. Mm-hmm. I'll say this, my concept of pruning was pretty much limited to fruit trees. I thought that's what pruning meant. It's a woody tree that you're out there with a saw or big set of loppers, and you're pretty much doing it in the winter. Well, my thoughts on pruning have evolved. And now I realize that this is something you can be doing on a lot of vegetables, actually, and really using it as a tool to both control their growth and to open up the structure so that you get more air and light in there. Yeah. So, I mean, last time we were talking about, I was pruning tomatoes and squash. I've also been pruning peppers and eggplant up there. I just wander around the garden this time of the year with my clippers. And for about, an hour a week, I'm probably just pruning stuff. Sometimes it's for convenience. Like at my own home garden, I have this grapevine that just grows like crazy every week. And I'm always trying to clip it out of the path. Sometimes it's to kind of shape things a little bit, maybe make them a little more ornamental. Like I have a bay leaf plant that I'm trying to sculpt a little bit. But for the most part, it's just to open stuff up, get more air and light in there. So I'm constantly doing that.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to just bring to people's attention is that I'm just going to hold these up. This is no product sponsorship. These guys don't even know I exist. But these are Job's organic fertilizer spikes that I get at my local nursery. Let me show you what they look like. Here's what they're.
There you go.
There we go. Look at that. It literally is a little compressed. See, I always have to do the opposite of what I think I should do to get the camera to do what I want.
There you go. You got it right there.
Yeah. So these are these little compressed pellets of fertilizer that are in the shape of a spike. What these things are great for is you can just push them into a container. The soil, you know, at Noble Rot, we have a lot of containers, a lot of things in containers, herbs, peppers, all kinds of stuff, beans, all kinds of whatever we have, we can grow it in the container. These things, without disturbing the soil, really, you just push them in a certain number per container, depending on how big the container is, and they will just start to dissolve and provide extra fertility for the plants. And you can see I've got some different formulations. This is a kind of an herb formulation that has more consistent. It's got the numbers 4-3-3, so fairly equal across the major nutrients of nitrogen, N, P, and K, phosphorus and potassium. This one is for flowering and fruiting plants, so the numbers read 2-7-4, so really high on the phosphorus. So, you know, with my peppers, for example, like I got a jalapeno pepper that's got about 20 jalapenos on it. It's in about a 4-gallon container. I just jammed about 5 of these things in, and I'm hoping for 20 more jalapenos on there, because the plants really will exhaust the soil in the container, and it's up to you to keep fertilizing. You have to continue, whether it's through liquid or I like these guys because you don't have to disturb very much, and you just pop them in. So about once a month from July on, July, August, and September, I'm pretty much popping these things in and really taking advantage of the end of summer. You know, we really want to ripen all that fruit. We want that plant to just produce as much as it can. So that's kind of what's going on up at the Noble Rot. Just
and the idea of like exhausting container soil of its nutrients and everything too is something those who are growing in containers and everything who don't have some sort of wicking method going on should really also be thinking a lot more about too, because what we're doing is watering from above and just constantly flushing water through that soil.
Yes.
So we're flushing nutrients from there as well too. So it is also extra important to also be mindful of that if you are watering from above without like a wicking method for your containers.
Yeah, even in the field too, you know, it's a common practice to do what's called top dressing, where you'll sprinkle the fertilizer on the top of the soil around your plants and then rub it in with some kind of a tool, some kind of a cultivator, or even your fingers. So really, people need to be thinking about continuing to fertilize. It's not really a one and done enterprise. It's kind of like maybe a big one at spring or initial planting, and then some other liquid fertilizer or solid fertilizer that's worked into the soil at some point later on to really keep production going. Because you'll see the plants will tank, especially in containers. You'll see this because they really do literally exhaust the resources. But even in the ground, even in a raised bed, they can still just take all the local stuff, and then you'll see leaves start to yellow. You'll see production start to go down. So it's really worth continuing. You got to stay on the game with gardening.
Yeah, definitely. Got to stay on top of it, especially those containers. Like I said, I'm dealing with some heat waves down here right now. I don't know how bad it is for you up there in Portland right now, but we've been topping well over 100 here a few times this last week, and it looks like it's going to be inching right back up again here this next week. So again, we're out there trying to keep things again hydrated. We want to keep that soil nice and hydrated and not dry out at all too, especially for us container gardeners. That can be a challenge as well.
I hate to say this in public, and you're probably gonna throw something at me. But we haven't, this year we've had a mild summer. We've not had a 100-degree day yet. We haven't even broken one 100-degree day, which is unusual for the last few years. But
I will say though, we are actually on the lower end of the last few years as well of our 100-degree days though too. I think we've really only had a few of them so far. And I know over the last couple of summers, we were like setting records for how many 100-degree days we have. So I think I think as we talked about before, this is kind of like one of those little dips in the spike as we're moving up in the growing heat from summer to summer and everything. So I guess we can kind of just be a little thankful for it, right?
Yeah, we're catching a tiny break this summer, but it sounds like you're catching less of a break than I am in Portland. It's amazing how just being, a couple 100 miles away from each other can make that much of a difference, right?
Yeah, it's pretty wild for sure.
Yeah.
Right on, Mark. Well, it's just about that time, man. And we got a really great book today.
Oh,
We got
God,
everything,
I can't
all of that. So I think it's just about time for us to go ahead and move on with our day today and
Take the plunge.
get with this monthly gardening book club. So we'll be right back here in just a few minutes, you guys, or just a minute, just not a few minutes, just a minute, you guys. We're not going to take too long. And we'll be right back with this is really, really great book. You guys are going to want to.
The Triumph of Seeds.
Yeah, you definitely want to stick around for this one.
Yeah.
Hey gardeners, thanks for tuning in to our show today. We'll be right back at it here in just a moment. I just wanted to take a second here to highlight our regular videos and features here on the Urban Gardener channel. Our weekly garden journals, and our incredible featured visits. All right, everybody. Welcome back. Here we are. Just one moment. We'll get right on to our monthly gardening book club. But I just wanted to mention our last couple of Sundays. We haven't really had too much of a Saturday show for a little while. I apologize for that. We're going to be right back on track with that real soon. But if you didn't get a chance to check out last Sunday's show, we had a really great show with our good friend, Master Gardener Scott Wilson, for our Ask Gardener Scott every second Sunday of the month. You want to go back and check that out. Man, we covered a lot of great stuff. I think it was probably one of our best Gardener Scott shows last Sunday. We covered a lot of ground when it came to gardening and getting your garden questions answered. And then also too, I do want to mention the Sunday before that as well, we had another great roundtable conversation with our good friend Tony O'Neill from Simplify Gardening and Marc Valencia from Self-Sufficient Me. Tony joining us from over in the UK, and our good friend Marc Valencia joining us from down under in Australia. So we had a real fun gardening conversation talking about gardening all around the world. You'll want to go back and check out that conversation as well too if you haven't already. But all right, everyone, it's time for the monthly gardening book club. All right. And now let's welcome back our good friend, Mr. Marc Colbert. I know. Isn't that?
I get so excited. Right? I get so excited at these things, Enoch. This is great.
It's so awesome. I know. And each and every month, we have been so fortunate, everybody. I mean, really, this book club has been amazing. We have not missed a beat one month throughout this whole book club with the types of books we've been lucky enough to have featured here on the show with these amazing authors, too. And this month, we've got The Triumph of Seeds by Dr. Thor Hansen.
Yeah.
This is such a great book. I'm telling you, I really just love digging into this book. You know, we cover all sorts of different types of books, Marc, and as well as we talk about when we announce our next book as well too. But you know, we've covered some fiction books, some real how-to gardening books, some foraging books, some all sorts of things. But this one just really digs into some really, I think, not necessarily interesting and fascinating, but I think in some ways some important storytelling when it comes to seeds and how they impact our lives, right?
Oh my God, the whole shape of the modern world. You know, just as I was making my way through breakfast today, I was thinking about that, just drinking my coffee, thinking about, oh my God, all those stories about coffee that are in there. And, you know, whatever it is, you're just looking at your clothes, you're looking at, I'm having a piece of bread. I'm thinking like, oh, thank God the grasses store lots of starch. I mean, this is awesome. It's just, you know, this sense of, and I think what the book really communicated to me is the need to care for seeds, because they're so we wouldn't be anything about who we are right now without these seeds.
Yeah. And in some ways it's just, the learning of kind of how they came about and really evolved into our lives in a sense, though, too, is just so fascinating. I think even as just a gardener, when I was first started gardening, I hadn't put too much thought into all of that as I was planting out all of these sort of seeds and everything too. So really, I mean, in some sense of the idea, like seeds are just there in some sense, right? But wow, their story really is just really amazing.
And of course, if you're, this book would just apply to any citizen, any human on the planet, right? From present times to times past. But as a gardener, we have that much more attachment to and connection with seeds. I mean, these are the things that drive us to levels of madness in the winter as we're looking through seed catalogs, and that we trade with each other like currency. It's like, this is our jam. So man, this is a great topic to really just dive into.
Yeah. Also reminds me too of one of our first little projects together. We met up at the rooftop, as we talked about it, Noble Rot and everything. But I got together with you for like one of our first little video discussions and stuff, and we talked a lot about seeds and seed catalogs and the collection of seeds, right?
Yeah. There's a fun little, before we get Thor on, there's at the front of my copy of the book, there's like 3 pages of reviews, all of it glowing. But there was one thing that caught my attention. One guy wrote, seeds, one of the least impressive looking natural objects. And I was like, what? Shut your mouth. That's hold your tongue. That's terrible. That is not, they're not they're fascinating. They're to all kinds of shapes and sizes. And it's like, the guy went on to say some really good stuff about the book, so I forgave him. But that first sentence was like a slap across the face. I was like, what?
I kind of feel that too, because it kind of goes along with what I was saying as kind of a new gardener and someone who was new to gardening and growing and that sort of stuff, is that we kind of, think past a lot of that sort of stuff. You know what I mean? And really it was in those first connections with you and discussions and looking at, we got tables out and looking at all these seeds. You were showing me some really cool stuff. So for me, that was really kind of that, wow, I was really starting to grow in this sort of sense of like the fascination of seeds and the different individual varieties and how they do, their job in a sense. It's just really interesting, and I found that to be more and more interesting as I learned more about gardening and growing and got more familiar with the plants that I was growing from seed.
Right. Yeah. So wow.
Right on. Yeah. Well, anyways, let's not waste any more time. I know you're sitting back here listening to us, waiting to get on here and all of that. So let me see if I can't get this set up right here. And let's welcome in Thor Hansen. Hey, how you doing? Thanks for joining us today.
Hey there. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for being with us. This is a great honor for us, believe me.
Oh, my pleasure. I have to apologize for appearing in my car, but I live on a rural island in Washington State, and if you want to have a good internet connection, you have to park right behind the library and use their Wi-Fi. So we're lucky today. I got the best parking spot for a Zoom call in the whole library lot.
Oh, so we're not going to get you from the raccoon shack, huh?
I know, right?
No, not if we wanted to have a good conversation. Our internet connections out here are pretty feeble.
Wow. Okay. That's pretty.
We'll take it however we can, Thor. It's just really awesome to have you here today. And again, as you can tell, Marc and I have just really been enjoying this book this last month. Just a really, really great book. You just put so much wonderful research into this and put together just some really, not just research though, there's a lot of good researched books out there you can read, but the storytelling of this research was just phenomenal. Really, really great book, man. Just so glad that we got to feature your book here on our book club.
Oh, I'm really glad that you chose it, and it's a great topic for gardeners, but as you pointed out in your intro, really for anyone, because we take these things for granted, but seeds are absolutely integral to our lives. As you pointed out, from the clothes we're wearing to the the coffee that's altering our brain chemistry at this very moment.
Exactly. Oh, I'm telling you. And again, too, how you and you put it together just the right way. You told the story in a ways that just really brought it to the next thing. I loved it all the way. But before we really go in and dig into this book, though, Thor, I want to give you a minute here. Just kind of maybe introduce yourself to everybody. Let us know a little bit about yourself, your background, and all of that, and what brought you to writing this book, Triumph of Seeds.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. So my background is in the sciences. I'm a conservation biologist and botanist with the degrees and so forth that go along with that. And I got interested in seeds during my doctoral research. I was studying the seeds of these enormous trees in the rainforest down in Central America. And I was interested in how the seeds traveled from place to place. I was looking at the genetics of the seeds, and I was studying how the fragmentation of the rainforest impacted the genetic diversity of these plants over time. And the seeds were a big part of that study. I was searching for them all across the rainforest and, doing genetic analysis. And so, gosh, went through all of these years of research and published all the papers and did all of that. And it was right towards the end of that I was considering these massive cool seeds that I'd been studying and realizing I don't know anything about how these things work. How does a seed do all of this? How can you take this baby plant and put it in this state of suspended animation and move it across the rainforest to another location and have it wait for just the right moment for it to germinate and begin to grow again? Because we tend to forget that, the seed is not distinct from the plant. That is the plant. It's just a very young plant, with its nutrition in there, ready to grow.
Yeah.
And I was absolutely dumbfounded that I could do years of research and not really understand the basics. And so that started this fascination, doing more deep dives into seeds and working on a full book about them that would tell their story, the biology and the evolution, but then also tell the story of why we are so dependent upon seeds.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Let me, before we jump into any particular questions, one of the little things that I read in the first reviews was intriguing to me. And like Enoch, I also really enjoyed the storytelling and the way you put the stories together. They were very craftily written. It was a page turner. Somebody said, one of your previous books that I didn't read is about feathers. And they said, they were comparing the two books, and they said, this one was somehow more engaging, more grounded in ordinary experience. Can you talk about the shift in terms of what did you do anything particularly in this book to really make it more oriented toward the storytelling?
Well, I think that the topic lends itself to that, in that because seeds are so important to us, there are all of these stories that anyone can relate to.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, if you identify the things that make seeds so successful out in nature, the seed plants dominate the flora of this planet, which wasn't always the case. It used to be dominated by flower plants. But if you identify those key characteristics that make them so successful, and the first is that seeds, evolve the ability to contain nourishment, to germinate, to fuel that germination and early growth of the baby plant. That was a brand new invention when seeds evolved it. But that's, exactly why they're so important to us as a source of food, because that nourishment is in there for the baby plant. We can steal it, in a sense, steal food from babies to feed ourselves. So if you start to analyze things in that regard, like why is it important in nature, you realize that's the same reason it's important to us. Another characteristic then is how seeds defend against attack. Because they have all that nourishment in there, there are all sorts of animals, including us, that want to eat these things, and you must defend. And sometimes you have a thick shell for defense. Right. But even more commonly, you defend with chemicals.
Right. Yeah. I love that part of it.
That's why we end up then, with so many of our spices and our pharmaceuticals and drugs and all then our caffeine or what have you, all of these chemical defenses. So if you start to analyze this from the biological perspective and get the story there, you realize that that story is reflected in a human story. And so it made for a very natural flow between the science and the cultural aspects of seeds that I think lent itself to storytelling right from the start.
Yeah. Well, you succeeded really, really well with it. It's a great stories within stories, as one of the reviewers says. It's great.
I mean, it's one thing to like research and do the research on seeds and get into the science and go through all that sort of stuff, but finding all of these different perspectives and angles and stories, you know, just that fit into this picture. It's just, I mean, I can't imagine the amount of research you put into that part of it, which wasn't even the seed aspect of the book. It's so loaded with just individual stories that just come at you about the importance of these seeds throughout time and all of that. But yeah, let's dig in. Let's go into this and talk about some of these different things throughout this book and try to kind of get through here a little bit. But you kind of start the book here. We're talking about why seeds are so vital for people. And you list 5 reasons here. Seeds nourish, seeds unite, seeds endure, seeds defend, and seeds travel. Want to talk about that just a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. So I just mentioned a little bit about the nourishment and the defense, you know, and if you think about how seeds evolved, they evolved from the spore plants, you know.
Yeah.
Spores don't have these 5 characteristics. So those were evolutionary novelties. So the first 2 we've talked about a little bit. If you go to the third one, sort of the uniting idea, that means that seeds have this ability to combine genetic material from the parents through the process of pollination. And pollination is a system that we can manipulate, in a sense, to our own ends. And in terms of gardening, in terms of horticulture, in terms of agriculture, that's hugely important. That we can breed plants that have the characteristics we're looking for. You can breed a sweeter tomato, or you can breed the corn that grows right in your area by combining pollen and saving seeds and working on those varieties over time. That is hugely important out in nature, but also hugely important in terms of what we can do for developing plant varieties. And you can't do that with spore plants. Spore plants reproduce in a different way entirely. You can't manipulate that process, which is part of the reason you don't see people out there farming ferns and horsetails. You just can't do it in the same way. So that is also, you know, it's a biological story, but also one with huge importance to us. And then this fourth characteristic that's so important for seeds in nature is the ability to endure in the soil, the ability to go dormant and to, in a sense, time travel, if you think about it. We are used to thinking about seeds traveling through space, right? Traveling sometimes vast distances, drifting on the wind, or being carried by an animal, or what have you. But seeds have this ability to also travel through time, through that ability to lie dormant in the soil. And they do so because there's a great advantage to germinating at the right moment. If seeds just fell off the plant or were dispersed and germinated immediately, in our neck of the woods, you guys were talking about climate just a few minutes ago, and 100-degree days. Well, what if you're a tiny seed that germinated immediately on a 100-degree day and it would just wilt? It's dry. It's the driest part of the year. Too hot. Terrible. So this ability then to endure allows seeds to last until growing season. The growing season is appropriate for a young plant. That might just be through the winter, but it might also be years in the future. There are seeds that are adapted to sprout after fire or after flooding events. In rare, instances of rainfall in the desert, they can stay in the soil until the moment is right. And that is a crucial aspect of seeds that has given them great advantage in nature, particularly for growing in drier habitats. But also it's something we are utterly dependent upon. We know it as gardeners because we can save seed. As you were mentioning earlier in the program, you get so excited about the seed catalogs in winter. Here they come. You make your plans, you get your seeds. Well, you can trust that those seeds are going to be still ready to go in the spring when you plant them. And if you don't get around to it, if that year you can save them usually till the next year, sometimes years ahead of time, you're still planting those seeds. Those kale seeds, that you have can last for years. And that's truly remarkable. So the ability to store seeds for planting, and then the ability to store seeds after harvest. If you think about, the grains that make up such a large proportion of our diet, and you go out and visit how these things are stored, well, they're just heaped up in piles in granaries, and they last just fine for months on end, so you can store the seed harvest for long periods of time. And that opens up all sorts of possibilities in terms of culture. There's a great study that came out a few years ago now about how the reliance upon seeds and upon grains really helped to drive civilization in a sense. Because once you have the ability to store that food, you have the ability then to tax it, right? You also have the necessity to defend it. And so you start having these social constructs that, if you really boil it down, they are based upon this ability to store food, which is based on the ability of seeds to endure, in a sense. And you don't see those things developing in cultures where you can't store food. You see it in the seed-based cultures. You see it also in the Andes, where the Peruvian cultures were able to freeze dry potatoes. They could save a starch. But if you can't save a starch in a way that needs to be defended and in a way that can be taxed and so forth, that will really slow down the development of those complex social systems. So again, you see this incredible cultural story based in the biology. And then the fifth one of those characteristics that is also a wonderful biological story is the way that seeds evolved to travel, to disperse. The ability to move from place to place has given them great advantage in nature. Moving and sometimes with incredible specificity to certain habitats where they need to be located in terms of germination and growth. But that also is so important to humanity, in that it's the dispersal of something like the cotton plant that led to those long strands that we use to weave into jeans and t-shirts and everything else. But even more so, you look at all of the fleshy fruits that we desire to eat. They're so delicious, from your apples and your pears to your berries and all of those things, all of the sweetness and the fruit aspect of those food sources evolved for the sole purpose of temptation, luring people and animals into moving those seeds from place to place. So it's a remarkable, again, connection to the biology of seeds. What evolved for the transport of seeds in nature is something that we have then co-opted for our own food sources, and developed even further to be even sweeter and more delicious, and now rely upon for a very important part of our diet, and one of the most delicious parts of our diet, all of the fleshy fruits.
Wow. That's such a great organizational structure for the book, too. Just those 5 words are so easy to kind of hang on to. And then you can just hang little facts on each of those. It's like, oh, yeah, defend, unite, nourish, travel. Oh, cool. Yeah, it's a great way to organize the book.
Yeah, well, the seeds did it for me. No problem.
That's right.
All right. I'm going to put a question to you that's just going to take on a problem head on. And you very politely allude to it in the book, and I think it'll be of interest to our general gardener folks. It's this issue of seed dormancy, and at one point, you've got these experts you're quoting that you're very respectful of. One, I think, is named Carol Baskin, and her idea is that the seed is slowly eating away at its reserves. It's metabolizing, but it is slowly doing it at a very reduced rate. And so it can last a long time, but eventually it'll reach a point when it drops off. And then the other one is the director of the National Seed Bank, Chris Weathers or something. And she says, no, life is not going on. Nothing's happening in the seed, just like the same way your medicine in a medicine cabinet would decay. It's not living, but it's going to have an expiration date. The seed is going to expire. You don't really come down on what you think there. Have you come to any further conclusions? Is the seed alive and respiring when it's dormant, or is it just inactive and by some means magically reactivates when water comes? What do you think on that?
I had that same question.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating thing. I mean, in a sense, well, I love something that Chris told, the director of the seed bank, told me, because, you know, she said, and they've done the studies that what they call a truly dormant seed. Now, there are some seeds that just sort of slow down and aren't truly dormant, but for the seeds that truly go dormant and need to be shocked out of that dormancy in some way to resume life again, she told me that if you put those things in a chamber and you measure everything going on around them, you can detect no signs of metabolism, no measurable metabolic activity for a truly dormant seed. And I told her, I was sitting in her office, and I'll never forget, I said, you know, in biology, we have a word for things with no metabolism. We call them dead, you know. And she said something that has stuck with me ever since. She said, well, if we know of things that are alive but aren't metabolizing, then maybe we need to change the definition of what it means to be alive.
Right.
And I find that truly profound, if she's right. And a truly dormant seed does not have metabolic activity. It's sort of frozen in some place in time. Yet it's clearly alive, because you can add water and here it goes growing again. Then our definition of life needs to change based on something as common as the seeds in your seed collection, or even in your kitchen. There are plenty of dormant seeds in your kitchen that you could bring back to life just with water. So I find that truly fascinating. And I think the distinction then, and what people still argue about in the scientific community, is whether there's some metabolic activity going on that you're just not able to sense, or is it true that in fact metabolism can stop and then restart? And we do know that whatever's going on in there for these the truly dormant seeds, one of the things about dormancy is desiccation. And we know we have to germinate a seed, you have to get it wet. And we know they imbibe water, and then you're off to the races and so forth. But it is remarkable when you think about how much water has been removed from the cells of a truly dormant seed. Sometimes it's 85, 90, even 95% of the moisture is removed from those cells. Yeah. And yet when you add the moisture back in, all the little organelles and things in there that make a cell function not only start to work again, they reassemble into the right positions. They have a memory of where they need to be, and they have a memory of function in spite of all the time that has passed, which can be years and years on end, decades, centuries even. And the way that we think that happens now is through something called a bioglass, where the sugars that remain inside that cell, that remain inside the seed, seem to, it's almost like a freeze-dried process. They make a glass-like structure that holds everything in place, so that when the water is added again and that becomes hydrated, it all starts working. It's still mysterious, but people have begun to co-opt that system now, even though we don't quite understand it. Started to use bioglass to make things like dry vaccines. If you think about the vaccine making process, vaccines they're live things that need to be usually refrigerated. And that's all well and good when you live in a place that's highly developed and there's a lot of refrigeration. But if you want to get vaccines out into very remote places where in some cases they're very much in demand and very necessary. That's always been a challenge in public health. How do you vaccinate out in these remote places where you can't refrigerate your vaccine? Well, dry vaccines are a way to do that, and they've just now begun to start successfully developing dry vaccines that can sit on a shelf for months on end and still function when you need them. And they did that by taking a sugar, a bioglass in a sense, out of seeds and repurposing it into a dry vaccine. So the short, you've already noticed
talking about another
short answers. I tend to go long.
Yeah,
So the short answer is we don't know still exactly how dormancy works, but we're already again stealing from the seeds for our own uses.
Exactly. I mean, we're still finding more and more in how they do it that can actually help and affect the way we're doing things as well too. The science of seeds is just continues to be more and more important. You know, I kind of think of, as you're talking about some of that stuff, like kind of like a state of, say, like anesthesia for humans, right? Or cryogenetics, where we're just kind of freezing things up or stopping things from going. And I found that, you know, just so fascinating with the idea of seeds, just that in there, that they're just, you know, they just kind of stop for a minute. And it kind of goes back to the idea of what you're talking about, traveling through time.
Yes.
Right. This allows these things to travel through time in so many different, and again, too, a part of this storytelling you're talking about and stuff, you know, you tell the stories of the 2,000-year-old seeds, you know, that are just right in the right conditions. You know, I've seen in, you know, other fascinating ones as well, too, you know, that I think I have the, I don't know what it is, 14, 15, 1,600-year-old cave bean, I think that Baker Creek has, and that sort of thing. But that's just another really fascinating thing too, is that dormancy allows for time travel.
Yeah, truly remarkable. And we still don't entirely understand it, which makes it even more fascinating. I mean, from a scientific perspective, there's still mystery there. There's still careers being carried out studying how these things actually work and learning things that help us in new ways, like these dry vaccines. It's truly remarkable, and it's such a common part of our daily life. We eat them all the time. We've got them we're surrounded by seeds all the time. We still don't entirely understand the science.
Incredible. You know, I did, Enoch, you mentioned the 2,000-year-old, the Methuselah, Judean date palm. And I, you know, again, like I got so wrapped up in some of these stories. At the time, you said, all right, this is a male palm. It was successfully germinated in a agricultural research station in Israel. They're trying to germinate female palms. I can't really comment on the research. So I went back last night. I was like, I got to find out the story of this. And indeed, I think they've generated one called Hannah. That's a female that they germinated one, and they've actually bred them. So it's like, this is crazy. I mean, there's like these seeds. It's not just a one-off. This is like a lot of seeds that were thousands of years old that have germinated again and are now back to, basically it's bringing a species back to life from the past.
It's a wonderful story. Yeah, this was the Judean date palm, which was a very famous fruit in the ancient world. It was the cash crop for King Herod's kingdom. It's mentioned, you know, in the Bible. It's mentioned in Roman writings. You know, these were such great fruits. The dates were so sweet and had such a wonderful flavor that, you know, Emperor Augustus ate them for breakfast every morning. You know, I mean, they just showed up all around, and yet they had disappeared after the fall of Judea. Those big plantations there, you know, were destroyed, and you know, life moved on, and that variety was thought to have been lost. And it wasn't until they, you know, some botanists got a hold of some seeds from an archaeological site in Israel and decided, you know, these things were so well preserved in that dry desert air. Let's try to germinate them. And by gosh, they did. And as you pointed out, Methuselah, the first one, was male. So they had the pollen. And then they madly went out to all these different, you know, museum drawers and everywhere else they could think of that might have some more of these date palm seeds from that era. And they found, you know, some female or more seeds, and they planted some, got some to grow, and they got a female. And so they brought back the Judean date, in a sense, from from history. But what I love about the story is that, in a sense, we can't help but think that that variety was extinct. It was gone, but it wasn't gone. It was still alive in the soil, in the right places. If you found the seeds, it was still with us. And all it took was that inspiration to get these things to grow again, and continue their life, in a sense. And now they've started harvesting fruit. The Judean date, after a 2,000-year lapse, you can now eat a Judean date again. And the scientists working on this said, fortunately, they were in fact very delicious. They were going to feel very foolish if they'd spent years on this project and it turned out to be a crummy variety of date. But apparently they're just as good as they were advertised.
Yeah, it's fascinating because there seems, as you point out, there seems to be some kind of threshold where the viability drops off. And we don't really know what that is for each particular seed. Although, Craig LaHoulier, who we had on a few months ago for his book, Epic Tomatoes, he's one of the great tomato breeders in the world. He was talking from a practical standpoint. He's like, I have grown out seed to about the 14-year point. And after that, the 15, 16, 17, that's where the viability for that, for tomatoes seems to drop off for him. Clearly, the Judean date palm had a longer viability.
Yeah.
But there's it's with us, but then it's not. And you point that out in terms of the seed banks, like they have to regrow them to know whether they're really still good or not.
Yeah, we have this idea, I think, when we use the phrase seed bank, that it's like a vault that you just turn the key and walk away. But those are really active places, because you do have to test the viability of the seeds regularly. Yeah. And as soon as the viability, like your tomato friend has noticed, it does start to drop off, and it's different for every species. And once it starts to drop, you've got to send those seeds out and have someone regrow the plants and harvest a new batch of seed to restock the bank. So it's a very active process to run a seed bank. And they have to have, as you can imagine, for a large seed bank like the one in Fort Collins, our national seed bank, they're partnered with stations and growing conditions all across the country, even down in Puerto Rico for tropical things, and off in Hawaii and what have you, because they've got to have the right conditions to grow all these different things they're trying to save in the seed bank. And they've got to be able to do that every certain number of years to keep the seeds that they're storing viable.
Yeah, which again too then really kind of, like you're saying, goes into this sense of how the seed is developed and all that, which again too, I hate to kind of go right back again to backwards a little bit, but I want to talk about that little bit of that kind of evolutionary change from spores to seeds. So I thought that was just so fascinating, this idea again too, as a regular old gardener. When I first started gardening, as I mentioned earlier, I just think of seeds, seeds are, this and that, and they've just been here in a sense, right? But there's just really, they haven't. There's a real change that went on. And also a part of that too is something that you talk about throughout the book. I'd like to hear you talk about a little bit too, as well, is that seeds pack a lunch. And I like that. I like that term, and it's something you come back to throughout the book. But they pack a lunch, and so how did this idea from spores to seeds, or what was going on there that in the plant world knew that it had to do something like this in order to start evolving forward?
It's a really fascinating transition, and if you look back in time before the seed plants, we had a very diverse and successful flora on the planet, but it was dominated by the spore plants. So we think of horsetails now as something small. Well, they used to be 30, 40 feet tall. There were huge diversity and some very large varieties. You had forests of these sorts of plants in all their forms. And if you want to see a step in that process that I think is fascinating to go and look for in nature, and the spore plants are still with us, right? They're still here, but they're now the minor part of the flora, and the seed plants have sort of dominated most habitats now. But if you go out and you find there's a plant called a spike moss, and a spike moss is a spore plant. But if you get down there and look, it's a beautiful, bunch of varieties, but if you look in between the leaves of the spike moss, you'll see their little spore packets. And you'll notice immediately that some of those are really small and some of them are big and fat. And that is the first step toward the evolution of seeds, and that you begin to separate the, in this case, the microspores from the megaspores. But you start to get this idea of separating the sexes, in that the microspores are evolving towards the pollen equivalent, and the megaspores are evolving towards, the seed equivalent, if you will. I mean, the female portion. Male, female, but true botanists hate it when we bandy about the male and female terms for plants, but it's practically very useful for us to think in that regard. So that was the first step. And once you make that separation, because before that, spores, were all the same size, and you had to then, if you think about the way even a fern now still reproduces, the spores drift off of those little brown things on the bottom of the leaves or what have you. The spore has to land in the soil, and it grows into a plant that you never see. There's a separate phase of the life cycle. It's
I thought that was so interesting.
Thumbnail. Yep.
Wow.
It's just a little green nub. And it's that thing that makes the egg and sperm that will then unite and grow into the next fern, right? Or what we think of as a fern. Yeah. So once you make that separation, you're able then to start to evolve toward a seed, in that you can move the pollen separately from moving the female parts, and that was the first step. So you can see that begin to take place. Once that happens, then you have this ability to start to imbue the female portion that's going to become fertilized and become the seed with nutrition, and that gets to the second aspect of packing a lunch. It was Carol Baskin who told me this phrase, which I just still love, but she said, I tell my Botany 101 students that a seed is a baby plant in a box with its lunch. And it's a wonderful way to think about a seed, because it captures so much of this evolutionary story, and so much of the practical story of seeds. But it's and so that's what you see then when you start to separate the spores and evolve towards the seeds. But once you've done that, then you can pack this lunch for the baby plant. And then you can have your pollen moving separately through the air or on a bee or what have you, that's going to fertilize the whole situation. But when you've got nutrition packed into a seed, that just opens up all sorts of possibilities, right? In that if you, and it's all dependent upon the ecological setting. How much of a lunch are you going to pack? What's your strategy as a plant for dispersal and for growing the next generation? So if you are, an alder tree, you don't pack much of a lunch. The strategy is you're going to make a huge number of seeds and hope that a few of them land in the right place. Same for, any variety of prolific, like an orchid is even more extreme. There's no lunch in there at all. There's just millions and millions of seeds that have to unite with a fungi in the soil to actually germinate and grow. So there are all these strategies. At the opposite end of the spectrum, then, if you are an avocado or the ancestor to avocados out in the jungles of Central and Southern America, and you're in this dense rainforest setting, where if you plop your seed over there, you disperse it, you get some animal to move it away. That's great. It plops it down there. And it's just shady as heck. There's no sunlight. And so if it just germinates without much of a lunch, it's not going to be able to make any food for itself. It's just going to wither and die. So the strategy there is you make this enormous seed packed with enough nutrition that baby plant can germinate and sit there living off the nutrition in those big cotyledons, those seed leaves of the avocado seed for months, even for years, waiting for a gap in the canopy that will give it enough light to start making enough of its own food to continue its growth. So everywhere in between there, you have all of this range of strategies that through the wonderful iterative process of natural selection have been developed and honed for different ecological settings. And it's just fascinating.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about that, the natural setting and the idea of the co-evolution of other organ, because so much about seeds comes from, the phrase that was used twice, I think by two different folks in here, is this kind of arms race. So, maybe we could talk about peppers. I think, of course, peppers are near and dear to Enoch's heart. Chili,
yes.
so many. But this idea of like, what is driving this thing that we love so much? The plant hasn't just produced it clearly for our benefit. What are the factors and forces where there was this ratcheting up of potency or chemical defense? And talk about that a little bit.
Oh, it goes on and on. But the peppers are a wonderful place to start. In that, if you think about this conundrum from the plant's perspective, you want your seeds to travel, but you don't want them to be destroyed. So this is a challenge in that you're trying. If your strategy, some plants will send things on the wind. Well, fabulous. But if you want to make some kind of a fruit and attract an animal to move your seeds around, that's a bit of a challenge. You want the animal to want to eat this thing, but you don't want the animal to destroy the seeds in the process. So if you're a pepper plant, again, this is a new world group that evolved here in Central South America and the southern part of the United States, that was the center of diversity then for these native peppers. There are a lot of rodents around, right? So you could, and rodents would love to eat the fruit and eat your seeds. Right?
Yes, they do. They still do.
And they still do, right? So what are you going to do then? You're making these fruits and you want them dispersed, but there are all these rodents coming in. And when a rodent eats the fruit and eats the seed, it gnaws the seed and destroys it. It will wreck it, destroy it completely. So this led then, in terms of your arms race, to the evolution of capsaicin, which is what gives peppers that potency that makes them hot. And if you look at where the capsaicin is concentrated in, your spicy pepper, well, there's a bunch of it right down at the tip, which is the first place a rodent might start to chew. So you're trying to scare it away from there by burning its mouth. And then there's a whole bunch of it right up around the seeds. If it gets through that, or it comes through the side, you want to scare it away from those seeds because you don't want a rodent chewing the seeds. So you can sort of see, if you start to analyze, this chemical and look at where it is in the fruit, you start to see the strategy. Like, get these rodents out of here. And then the other thing that's fascinating is that the chemical itself it is specifically designed, if you will, it evolved to scare away a mammal, and so it is it's a false flag, if you will, in that the chemical tricks the receptors in our mouths. It affects us the same way it would a mouse, mammals, and it tells you that the cells are being damaged, and it gives you that flash of hot sensation, but it's not actually burning your cells. It's just tricking that sensory perception that we have, right? So then if so this has evolved and this is working great and you're scaring away all the rodents. Fantastic, good for you, but your seeds are going nowhere, right? So you still haven't solved the problem. But fortunately, birds have a very different nerve a system for perceiving things through their sensory organs, and it does not perceive capsaicin in the slightest. It's not fooled at all. It's a different pathway. It's an absolutely different chemical pathway, and the birds can eat those seeds and eat the capsaicin and eat the fruits without suffering any consequences whatsoever. So you still have a disperser. In fact, you have a very good disperser who can eat those fruits and pass those seeds through without destroying them. They might get ground a little bit in the gizzard. They might get roughed up a little bit here and there. And in some cases, that's good. Could even scarify the seeds and make them germinate better. But they're not going to be gnawed upon. The birds don't have molars and big incisors and so forth. They just have a bill, and so they swallow them whole. and go through the bird, and it's dispersed. So it's this wonderful example of that sort of coevolutionary process, and that you've got an arms race with the rodents, but you've also got this escape hatch for the seeds to pass through birds and still be dispersed. So it's multiple species involved in that evolutionary dance.
And somehow we get to benefit from it and get our hot sauce.
I know.
That's right.
We get hot sauce at the end.
Yeah, that's so great. That's so great. Also, too, talking about again talking about the storytelling and bringing things together and all of that. I did go out and I got myself an almond joy.
Oh yeah.
Because I wanted to say that this was as well too my favorite snack when I was a kid as well too. I loved almond joys, mounds if that's all they really had, but I really wanted that almond when it came down to it. But
Yeah,
you use the almond joy to kind of tell a story of seeds and how they how they became important to us.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you think about the breadth of the importance of seeds in our diet. I mean, you look at something like an almond joy and you really see there's so much going on. I mean, you can just forget about it. You would never have that kind of a treat in a world without seeds, because obviously the almond seeds, so you forget about that. But look at the coconut in there, which is the meat. That's the lunch, by the way. That is the lunch taken out from the inside of, one of our largest seeds, the coconut, from the coconut palm. And then you look at the chocolate, and you've got to have, your cacao, which comes from, the seed of this, South American rainforest tree, or this kind of smallish tree, but fascinating in its own right, with these wonderful pods and the cacao seeds there. And you probably are going to have an emulsifier to keep that chocolate, nicely smooth and stable. And that's probably going to come from another seed, probably a soybean, something like that. So, I mean, if you remove the seeds from our diet, you end up with almost nothing worth eating, in a sense. I did another experiment in the book where I did this. There's no McDonald's on this island where I lived, so I took the ferry boat. I had my bicycle, and I got on my bicycle and I rode a few miles to the nearest McDonald's, in a town on the mainland here in Washington State. And I had everything I needed. I had tweezers and forceps, and I had a notebook, and I had a bunch of reference books, and I ordered myself a Big Mac sandwich. And I sat, and I will tell you, if you ever want to get a lot of looks in McDonald's from the people at the neighboring tables, you sit there with all that stuff scattered, and I was dissecting this Big Mac. What in a world without seeds, what would be left? Because, of course, with the Big Mac, for those of us of a certain age, we remember the jingle, 2 all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. That's the Big Mac. And by the time I got through, with the ingredients and pulled out the things that we rely upon for seeds, there was just almost nothing left, right?
Yeah.
Almost, you have the 2 all beef patties, and maybe if you're feeling very generous, you could throw in a few other ingredients, but it's hardly meal. You might still be eating something, but everything that makes that meal delicious or interesting, in that case, and in many other examples, relies upon the seeds in the diet.
Wouldn't even the 2 all beef patties?
Well, if you really do get down to it, the beef is
require the grain
via a bunch of consumption of grasses. So even that you could probably do away with. There's hardly anything left to eat if we don't eat seeds in our diet. Yeah.
It's just amazing. And again, too, I'm sorry, Mark, I think you're next, right?
No, go ahead, Enoch. Follow up with whatever you're thinking there.
Well, I was just kind of saying, though, too, is that we find here, too, as we're talking about things that we enjoy, whether it's an almond joy, a Big Mac, or all that sort of stuff, we're talking about seeds finding their way through, life. It's their lives leading up to us humans coming into the picture, and then things kind of change for seeds in a way. Right.
Yeah.
So you want to talk about that a little bit?
Oh, I mean, the way Our reliance upon seeds, of course, has favored the dispersal and the promulgation of certain aspects of seeds. So we've got certain seeds that are doing really well in a human-dominated world because we plant them and we move them all over the earth, and they're everywhere and they're doing great. But of course, our impact on the world in terms of habitat reduction reduces space for a lot of other kinds of seeds. And so we see this sort of combined, it's depending on the species. Some species do really well in a human-dominated world, others are suffering. And so part of that is reflected in the seed bank movement, where you look at the way we try to preserve agricultural varieties through seed banking, but also at a place like Kew Gardens, the Millennium Seed Project is really focused on producing wild biodiversity as well. And there already are several, at least a couple of dozen species in that seed bank that exist in the seed bank that have winked out in the wild. So that now is the repository for the species, with the hope that you can reintroduce them to the wild in the future. So, people have a great variety of impacts on seeds. The good news is, via seed banking and so forth, we can reduce some of the negative impacts and try to preserve varieties for the future. We see it in agriculture now all the time when we're talking about adapting to changing conditions. You guys are talking about how hot it's getting in the summers. And gardeners know that their gardening zone has probably changed already, depending on how many years they've been in the backyard. Well, we see that on the global scale. And if you look at something like the National Seed Bank for the United States, and you talk to the people there, well, one of the things they've got a lot of, right? They've got 40,000 varieties of in the seed bank is sorghum.
Sorghum.
Sorghum is the hot country grain. It is prolific and evolved in the northern part of Africa in really hot conditions, does very well. And so planning for the future of grain production in the temperate zone where it's getting warmer, the people who are planning ahead, thank God we have them, are saving up on varieties of sorghum, because that will be a much more common grain in our diet as the climate warms.
So we better get used to sorghum porridge, is what you're saying?
Yeah, it's not so bad.
It's not so bad. All right.
Let me ask a bit of a follow-up question on that, because I was really glad to see that you brought in the Seed Savers Exchange and Diane Ott-Wheely. Sure. And, her quote there, I think, is something that's very relevant to our listeners. She said the best way to save seeds is by planting them. And so, maybe I'm going to open up for you to give an appeal to gardeners in terms of what role gardeners can have in the seed saving movement. Obviously, the bank stores it for a little while. Even considering our wild plants, can gardeners be growing out this kind of stuff? Should we be growing out this kind of stuff? Where can we look for the kind of diversity that we should be growing out and preserving, so that we are playing our own role in this banking system, but the kind of banking that is the actual growing out from year to year?
Absolutely perfect point to make for the gardening community, in that from the scientific terminology, we talk about a seed bank as ex situ conservation. It's out of its element, in a sense. You're taking the seeds out of the system and safeguarding them for a period of time. But there's also the importance of in situ conservation. How do you conserve seeds in their environment, right? How do you keep them going? And it's really important for seed saving, in that the reason we have so many varieties of sorghum or anything else, tomatoes, what have you, is from our agricultural heritage, and from the fact that any one of us who gardens can go out and say, well, I want to save seed from my tomatoes this year. And you look at the row of tomatoes in your garden, and you're going to save the seed from the plant that did the best, or the plants. Some of them might have withered and not done as well. The fruit doesn't look as good. It was a smaller crop. That plant looks great. That's, of course, obviously, that's the one you're going to save. And so by doing that year after year, you're developing a variety that is suitable to the conditions in your garden. And that's why we have so many varieties, because farmers have been doing this for thousands of years. And every piece of property has its nuances in the soil and in the climate of that place, every valley, every stretch of land, every country. I mean, so we have this incredible variety, but that only happens when it's being planted. So when we do our ex situ conservation, that's very important, pulling seeds out and putting them in a seed bank, because a lot of things, you know, in terms of agriculture, are not being planted because we plant so many, so we rely on a few varieties grown in mass now rather than everyone with their own. And in nature as well, habitat loss has meant that there are a lot more things that are threatened. So the ex situ is very important, but it's only part of the story. And what gardeners can do is, by saving seed and by planting it in their own gardens, you keep that constant adaptation moving forward. You're saving varieties, but you're also allowing them to adapt. And you're allowing those plants to naturally, you know, become, you know, more accustomed to these hotter summers or whatever is changing. The moisture patterns are changing dramatically in the temperate zone now, as well as temperature. And if we don't do any in situ conservation, if we're not planting those things out, we're not giving those varieties the ability to evolve into you know, varieties that will succeed in these changing conditions. So it's a crucial thing, and it's something that gardeners can do by saving seed and by seeking out varieties. You know, mix it up. And fortunately, we love to do that, as you mentioned.
Yes.
Go nuts with the seed catalog. Well, do it. Mix it up. And if the other half of that often is overlooked too, is how we consume seeds. If you see some weird variety of apple in your grocery store, buy it. If you see some weird okra that you've never seen, whatever, buy it. Buy the weird stuff. Make a market for growing more varieties. You know, that's something we can all do, whether or not we have a garden to work in. Our shopping habits can encourage a greater diversity of crops, and we should all take those opportunities.
I love that. That's great. That's great advice.
Absolutely. And and also too, I do mention to everybody else who was watching and all of that, we do have a link down below to our friend over at the Urban Farm. He has a thing called the Great American Seed Up, and these are like seed banks in a box, in a way that you guys can look at as well too, that they're doing as well. And also in that same sort of sense of trying to get variety out there. It really is one of the great things about gardening, is that we can kind of, you know, if you know, we do have a garden, you're talking about, if you don't, and go buy those sort of things, absolutely. But if you do have a garden, that's one of the fun things about it, is being able to introduce these new varieties and these different varieties that are out there into our diets and our food and all of that as well too. One thing I wanted to dip into here, which I thought being a really great, fascinating part of all of this, again too, kind of getting into us humans and the side of what's happening here as well too, is, you know, talking about coffee and the important role that caffeine, you know what I mean? And again too, how are all these little chemicals, either some of them are pushing us away, and then some of us are just, you know, hyper pushing things in a way too, as well as like the story of caffeine really shows. I mean, really the Industrial Revolution, as you talk about, all these sort of things really kind of being the result of this discovery, right?
It's really wonderful. It's a great story if you look at the history of coffee. And for those of us who enjoy it, you know, we think, thank goodness for our local roasters or whoever makes this great brew. Well, you shouldn't be thanking them. You should be thanking, you know, things like snails and slugs, because it was those creatures out in nature that were damaging coffee plants and inspired, if you will, the evolution of the caffeine and the other chemicals that make coffee so delicious for those of us who like it. You know, it's things like slugs that respond to caffeine with what they call in the literature uncoordinated writhing. You know, these are the creatures that actually are responsible for the caffeine in your cup. So those are the creatures that deserve our regard in that situation. But it's a great story historically, because if you think about when coffee really, you know, hit it big in a sense in Europe as a breakfast beverage. It was right around the time, it fits so neatly into the time of the the Enlightenment and moving towards the Industrial Revolution and all of these things, and that for the breakfast, the traditional breakfast for 1,000 years through the Middle Ages and everything else in Europe, particularly Northern Europe, would have been what they called a beer soup. And so you had some grains and you had some beer, some homemade ale, and you threw it all together, and maybe you added something fruit or something sweet on a special occasion. But that got you started in the morning, and that gave you not only some nutrition from the grains that are in it, but also a slight buzz. And that was just the beginning, because beer was such a common, beers and ales were a common. I mean, nothing, not even Germany now with its beer consumption, they're pikers compared to how much beer was being consumed in those days. It was and there's a reason for it, not just because of the tipsiness, but because the fermentation process made beer a lot safer to drink. In that, if you were just drinking water from the neighborhood well, you're probably going to get pretty sick. But if you're drinking beer, it was a lot healthier. And so people, even before they understood the microbiology that contributed to that, they knew the results. And so beer was a very important beverage. So you introduce coffee into that scene, and when it starts to take off, there's this real, switch in the chemical response of the human brain. If you start to replace the fermented seed with the caffeinated seed, it leads to this boost of mental activity and acuity and so forth, that was very well suited to the thought processes in the coffee houses during the Enlightenment and this heady sort of thinking, but also for industrial activities, getting out into a busy workday with a boost of energy. All of those things sort of occurred at the same time that coffee was spreading across Northern Europe and into the Americas and so on and so forth. So the spread of caffeine then through that delicious seed brew really changed the course of history, contributed to a very important shift in the history of our species. And you see it, even today. I mean, you look at some of these, the tech heavy places like Seattle or San Francisco that have a really strong coffee culture. Well, that coffee goes hand in hand with sitting behind a computer and programming like mad until from the early morning until late in the night and what have you. So you still see this connection between caffeine and some of our industries and modes of productivity. And you can just think about it from the standpoint of any undergraduate student at a college or university. They know darn well that you're going to have a very different result if you are out there drinking beer before your classes, or whether or not you have a cup of coffee before you go. You're going to get a lot, the result in your grade at the end of the semester is going to be very different. And I think, we all know that now from experience or watching Animal House or whatever else it might be, that is a very different result for the coffee drinkers.
Wow. Enoch, you interested in, you got a question from the group? I've seen a couple of
Actually, and David's always throwing us some really great, gives us a good assortment of questions here. Let's see, there was one here. Oh boy, let's see here. Oh, here, let's try this one. Which seed adaptation feels most like science fiction made real? Well, that was
dormancy. Yeah, one word, dormancy. It's science fiction made real, because we still don't quite understand that ability for a seed to go into suspended animation in a sense. And you think about something like Methuselah or these other varieties that can last for hundreds of years in that state. That is truly remarkable. And you can't just do that with any old cell. You can't do it with the cells in your body. Don't try it. Don't desiccate yourself. It's not going to work out well. The closest example that we do have in the animal kingdom would be something like a brine shrimp. If anyone read comic books as a kid and remembers the sea monkeys, You know, you were dying to have the sea monkeys with the little crown and the mama sea monkey with the lipstick. Well, they weren't quite that cool, but they were still pretty neat in that they're these little freeze-dried shrimp, essentially, that you could get through the mail and add them in water, and they'd come to life in a sense, and they'd start to move around and continue their shrimpy lifestyle. And those things evolved in, desert settings or ephemeral pools where they have a very brief period of activity, and then they evolved the ability to, have a desiccated portion of their life that would last for years or a season or potentially years until the pool flooded again and they could continue the next generation. But it's very rare in animals, very, very common in seeds, and still quite mysterious. So that to me is still straight out of sci-fi.
Excellent. Let's see if we can't, I want to try to see if we can combine these two questions into an answer here. Bowtie asks, what question should we all ask next time we buy a packet of seeds? And where do you want listeners to look more closely tomorrow morning?
Ooh, wow. So the seed packet that's a really interesting question. I'm gonna echo something that we talked about earlier, and I want you to look for the weird seeds. I want you to look for weird varieties. My son just for the last birthday or holiday or whatever it was, he spotted some round carrots, and he gave my wife round carrot seeds for I guess it would have been Christmas. And so she's planning. Now we're eating round carrots. Fabulous. We've never had round carrots before. That's cool. Why not? So when you see the round carrot, when you see the strange thing in the seed packet area of wherever you shop or in your catalog, whatnot, try some weird thing. So try out a weird seed and see if it'll grow and see what it's like, because the more we do that, the more we're conserving, seed varieties in our gardens, which is truly the way to go with seed saving. And what to look at is, that's such a great question. And it actually is something that I spent several years recently working on for a book called Close to Home, which is all about the biology of your backyard, not just your garden, but everything going on, in your yard that we tend to overlook. And so what I would ask you to do then, when you go outside, the next time you go outside, is to find a way to change your perspective, because there's so much that we're walking past on our way to the car or on our way to the garden or on our way to over to get the hose or whatever it is. We're tracked into our patterns, and we overlook all sorts of really fascinating things that are right there in our own yards. So change your perspective, and there are a number of ways you can do it. You could go out after dark with a flashlight and focus all of your attention on that one little illuminated spot. What's happening in that? You could climb a tree if you so desire. What's happening up there? There's probably a part of your yard you know nothing about. It's certainly the case in my yard. What's up in the trees? I had no idea. Had to climb one. But another way that I really encourage is to get down close to the ground. We do this as gardeners when we're down on our knees, but we tend to be focused on a task. Instead of getting down and focusing on a task, get down and see what's there in any part of your yard. So one thing that I did to retrain my eyes was to crawl around my yard. Now, you may get a few looks from the neighbors. They tell them you're looking for your contact lens or whatever it is. But put some knee pads on or whatever it takes and get down there and crawl through the yard. And you're going to see all kinds of stuff. You're going to see, little mushrooms the size of toothpicks, and you're going to see spider webs between blades of grass that you've never noticed. And you're going to see flies of all sorts, that are so small you just don't notice them when you're walking around from your normal perspective. A marvelous thing that it was my son actually as a younger kid who discovered in our yard that now we see and look for every year are these little turrets of mud. Little turrets, perfect little beautiful turrets of mud, and we didn't know what they were until we paid enough attention to see that it was something called a potter wasp, a harmless wasp. That's probably a good thing to have near your garden, because they eat only, this species at least, the grubs of particular weevils. And so they're out there getting these weevil grubs, and they take them down their little mud turret under the ground and feed their, provision their offspring down there. And all of this is going on, I guarantee it, wherever you live. And so that would be my my order for you, or request or dream, would be that you'd go out and change your perspective on your yard and see what new things you can observe.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. I can't wait to get your latest book. That sounds amazing as well.
Oh, it was a great adventure. It really was. I mean, and in part, for me, having done biological research in so many places around the world, and then suddenly realizing, much in the same way I did with seeds, like, what do I really know about these things? Well, what do I know about my yard? I mean, this is where I spend the most time in nature, and yet there are things here. There are species in my yard that have never been described by science, and that's probably true where you live as well.
Fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, too, so much great stuff here. I just wanted to kind of read here from the end of your book here too. Just this, you say here, and I'll ask you to maybe kind of expand on it a little bit here. But you write, evolution behaves much like a gardener, saving only the most successful experiments. And there is nothing necessarily invalid about the triumph of seeds. Just as the spore plants yielded their dominance, so might seeds eventually give way to something new. In fact, this process may already be underway. With over 26,000 recognized species, orchids make up the most diverse and highly evolved plant family on Earth, yet their seeds are hardly seeds at all. Break open an orchid pod and the seeds puff out like dust, microscopic blips that essentially lack seed coats, defensive chemicals, or any discernible nutrition. They are still baby plants, but in Carol Baskin's analogy, they don't have the box or the lunch. In fact, they can only germinate and grow if they land in soil that contains just the right kind of symbiotic fungi. As such, orchid seeds have very little to offer people. No fuels, fruits, foods, or fibers, no stimulants or useful drugs. Only one species out of all of those thousands produces a seed product with any commercial value: vanilla. If orchids didn't have beautiful flowers, we would hardly be aware of them at all.
Yeah. Well, I think I wanted to include the orchid example to point out that we tend to think of what we see in nature as some sort of pinnacle. Like, we've gotten to this wonderful state and here it is. But it's a process. What we are looking at in nature, wherever we are, is a stage upon which the drama is constantly unfolding. Now, the time scale may be hard for us to grasp, but evolution is never idle. I mean, the whole term evolution comes from a sense of motion, if you boil it down to the Latin roots. And that's what it is. It's always out there changing and responding and developing. And so you look at a family like the orchids that are undeniably successful, so diverse, thousands upon thousands of species. They've really hit on something good, and they've done so by, in a sense, doing away with all of those seed characters that we have all just spent the last hour saying we're so great and successful, right? And so here is a family of plants that's figured out how to be very successful without those traits. Their seeds are in some ways more spore-like than seed-like, and so it's a wonderful example of how just because something is successful now doesn't mean that that's going to be the case forever. So we don't know what evolution might have in store. We don't know what the flora of this planet will look like, millions of years in the future. Will seed plants still be as successful, or will there be something clever that we haven't even conceived of that may come to dominate? We just don't know, and that's fabulous too.
Yeah.
In a way, it's kind of like it reminds me of the guy you were talking to about the Carboniferous period. And he said, we should be calling this the Coniferous period because these things existed at the same time. So I guess the point being that the change is potentially in our midst right now. We may not be able to see it. The conditions may not be right for its full flourishing, but the change is always in your midst. Otherwise, it doesn't just emerge fully formed. It always has to be in process, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. What are the hints and clues out there about the future? They're there. You're right. It's all happening, but we don't know what will succeed in the future. My gut is that, seeds are going to be dominant for quite a while. They're pretty good, but we don't know. We just don't know how long.
I'm not giving up my morning coffee or my bread, so I'll be at least promoting coffee and wheat.
Yeah, me neither.
Yes, for sure. Absolutely. Well, there we go. I mean, really, again, too, just such a wonderful book, Thor. Really just can't say enough about how just awesome and fascinating this book is. Again, so highly recommended. I hope you guys who are listening to this conversation out there go and check out link down below in our description there, so you can go and find Thor's website there and links to get yourself a copy of Triumph of Seeds, and as he mentioned too, his new book Close to Home. You definitely want to check it out. Like I said, I'm going to look forward to that new book as well too myself, as much as I've really enjoyed this book, Thor. So really, thank you so much, really, for spending your time here on the Let's Get Growing show on our monthly book club and talking all about this just really great book.
My pleasure. It was really fun to join in. And in terms of agriculture, you'll be happy to know that when I hang up from our conversation here, I'm scurrying right back over to our local county fair where my son is very involved in the 4-H program.
All right.
Oh, perfect.
Or I'll finish with one quote too from one of those reviews that if you stop too soon, it could be an insult, but if you keep going, it's a compliment. The guy said, "I cannot recall a book I was so eager to finish that I might begin it again." So I'm looking forward to, in the same way.
That's true. I love it.
Your book, and just, it's not the thing you can totally get everything out of the first time through. So really wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for spending time with us today, talking about it. It's great to be with you.
My pleasure. Thanks to you both, and happy gardening.
Okay, to you too.
All right.
Absolutely. Thanks, Thor. We'll see you around. And
So long.
you might. Let's Get Growing is sponsored by IV Organic.
Hi, my name is Charles Malky, biologist and plant expert with IV Organics, where we grow cool plants and author Saving the World with the Home Garden. IV Organic 3-in-1 Plant Guard has 7 natural oils that protect your plants, not just from the summer heat as well as winter cold, but also protects your plants from damaging insects and rodents. The oils in the product include castor, cinnamon, clove, garlic, peppermint, rosemary, and spearmint. These oils are natural insect and rodent repellent oils, which are encapsulated by the base powder, offering your plants months of protection at a time. 1 application per year will suffice for protection against damaging summer sunburn and winter sun scald, but if the target is pests, application as much as 2 to 3 times a year may be necessary.
All right, Mark. Oh, I'm gonna get it set up right there.
Oh my God. It's when you read a great book, it can shift your perspective on the world. And like I just heard in that, I've never paid so much attention to Charles's little segment there from IV Organics, because all of a sudden he's like talking about we make this with things like castor oil. And I'm like, wait a second, castor beans, that's a toxin.
Yeah.
What? No wonder why it's killing pests. It co-evolved with some pests somewhere and it's being used somewhere else now. So it's like, whoa, seeds.
Yeah.
They're just like right there. Everywhere you look, they're there.
Yeah, exactly. And again, too, utilizing nature in our gardens, right?
Yeah.
Through these sort of things to deal with and handle things as nature in some way does already, right?
Yeah. I mean, what an incredible book. I mean, it touches on 2 different levels. I mean, it touches on our practice as gardeners, of course, because we're all involved with seeds, but just so much of the human story is right there too. So it's good for just being a human being to know this stuff, right? This is good stuff.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And again, too, as gardeners, you're not going to be disappointed in reading and learning about this. The storytelling is just amazing, and you're just going to learn so much, not just about, seeds and how they've developed over time and all of that, but also us too. You know what I mean? It really is a story about us as well.
In our present times, things can look dark and depressing and such. And truly there are many challenges and many difficult things. But to surround yourself with somebody like a Thor Hansen, both today in person and just in his writing. He helps you get the bigger picture of human civilization. He helps you connect with the natural stories that are behind this. So I find it's just very helpful to combat the smallness of what seems to be going on right now, to realize we're part of this very big story. It's playing out in unusual ways. It gave us all this amazing stuff up to this point. And, maybe we can trust it a little bit more that somehow there's still some good at work in the world, there's forces at work that are creating interesting things for us that we can't even totally imagine.
Yeah. I again too, not digging too deep into all of that, but there are just fluctuations. Things kind of go a little the wrong way sometimes for a while, and then there's a reaction that pushes us back the other direction, and that's just kind of it is. Things will move back and forth at times and all that sort of stuff, and that's the thing we learn through examining our human history as well. But really, again, how so cool to be able to connect our human history with the history of seeds, and again, to plants, and how important they are to our lives, and everything. It's just a really great book.
Yeah, this is a really important one. I'm really glad we were able to take that one on, and I really encourage anybody who hasn't yet read the book to just go grab it and dig in. It will really enrich your journey as a gardener, and it's like you're seeing the world with these layered glasses. Instead of just seeing that thing in front of you now, you're seeing back in time. You're seeing other creatures that influenced it. It's not just isolated anymore. It's a web of meaning that
exactly
needs.
Yeah, one of the things I also wanted to mention to everybody out there too is we always say, hey, you can go right down below in the description. We've got Thor's website down there, so you can go find his books and all of that too. But let's just say, for those of you who might not be able to afford a book or anything like that, it might be a situation, go request it at your local library. That's another way we can support books and these authors who join us on our book clubs too, is to go and make requests at our local libraries for them to get copies of these books too.
Excellent idea. That's like the seed bank for ideas, right? The library.
That's right. Exactly. Our libraries are important, man. We got to keep them working and keep them going. So let's use them too, as well. And even if we do have a copy or can buy the book as well too, throw a request at your local library anyways, because again, it's just a great way to support, authors who are, again, the research and the work that went into this book. Oh my, Mark.
Yeah. I mean, just like, how would you like to be watched at McDonald's while you picked apart your Big Mac with the tweezers? That takes a lot of guts.
Yeah, exactly. It sure does. Right on. Well, let's get moving on here, Mark, man. Again, to another wonderful book club here this month. I mean, what a great deal. But let's start talking about next month. Next month,
back to school, man. That's my reality. We're starting back to school.
Yeah. As everybody knows, Mark here is a garden educator. He teaches garden education at a Montessori school there in Portland, Oregon. So you're looking to get back to school yourself. And I know that's the case for a lot of folks. End of August, September really kind of is that month that we look at for going back to school. So this next month, we're going to kind of focus on kids and gardening education in a sense, as well as we're also going to do something a little bit different that we haven't done, Mark, is we're going to do 2 book clubs in the month of September. What are we doing? This is awesome. We've got 2 book clubs set up for September. It's going to be, as usual, our 3rd Sunday of the month. And then we're also going to do a book club for the 4th Sunday of the month for September, because we have a couple of books and a couple of really great authors that we want to highlight when it comes to kids and gardening education. So first off, let's go ahead and mention we've got our first book will be for our first one here. And this one here, I better put up my little banners too, so we all could see here who we're talking about. But our first book for the 3rd Sunday of the month, next month, is this book by Marcus Bridgewater. Oh, I gotta get the banner down. Sorry, guys. Marcus Bridgewater. It's See Marcus Grow. So this is going to be a really great book. Marcus has been on the program before, and we've talked about some of his other books, but he just released this children's book. see Marcus grow. So this is going to be really fun to be able to we just kind of, for one, I wanted to start with one where we're kind of getting into the young kids, the little kids. So I'm kind of thinking this makes the kind of one of those perfect ones as a first book, or one of those first books we read to our little young children as well. Probably for me, my granddaughter, who is going to be, I'll be reading books to here real soon as well. So great book to get started with here. And then, Mark, for our fourth week garden book, we are going to check out another guest who's been on the show. We're going to feature his book, Plants to the Rescue. We're going to have Dr. Vikram Baliga join in with us here. He's a professor over at Texas Tech, and he wrote this book for kids that are just maybe a little bit older.
Yep.
But it's just a really great book about, plants and, just all different aspects of how we can utilize plants, in the times of climate change and environment issues and things like that. But really kind of almost like a little fun, get kids energized and motivated towards doing some things with plants.
Yeah, as gardeners, we're trying to change our own minds and trying to learn and develop, but we can't neglect the generation that's coming up. We have to develop passion there too, because that's really the transmission. We're only doing it for a brief time. We need to hand it off as soon as we can. Make sure that that's firmly rooted in the next generation. So sharing our love, sharing our joy. I remember a couple of people in the Seeds book became important plant people because they visited their grandfather's farm or their grandfather's garden. So this sense of, even if in your situation you don't have a really thriving garden or anything, or in totally urban environment, if you have a connection with some other loved one who wants to share that with you, it can lead to a whole lifestyle and a career that otherwise wouldn't have been there. So let's keep the kids in mind.
Yeah, exactly. In a way to kind of reference our book for this month and everything. Let's use these books and our gardens and all that sort of stuff to pack a lunch for these seeds that we're sending out into the world, right?
Exactly. So crucial. So as a garden educator, I couldn't be more excited about this coming month and what we have to offer. I think it's going to be great.
Yeah. So definitely go out and check out these books, Plants to the Rescue, and see Marcus grow. And there went my camera. Oh my! I know y'all can hear me, right?
Yeah, we're still hearing you loud and clear, Enoch. So that's good.
All right. Well, I'm gonna let you sit for 1 second here while I see if I can't fix this.
We got a technical. Enoch is the master. I mean, my hat's off really to him, because he does so many things during this show, including trying to keep everything going technically. Well, my hat's got readjusted there. Anyway, Enoch is always multitasking in a most impressive way. It's amazing how present he is when he's having to think about all these other levels of the show. I just get to come along for the ride, but there he is, the master is back.
Yeah. That's the way it goes. This is definitely now something with the new setup we've got with my camera. My camera doesn't like it, so we've got a whole new issue now going on. But that's all right. We'll get it figured out eventually. But again, Mark, what a wonderful day here. Wonderful book club that we've had. And again, thank you so much again for joining with us as well today for this great discussion that we had today.
Well, Enoch, I'm along for the ride here, man. I live and thrive with this kind of constant learning and the kind of format we've set up here, and that you've really made possible, reaching out to these authors, inviting them to come on for a discussion. It's one thing to read the book, but then, to get Thor here in person, just telling us some of the stories, going deeper. It's just so amazing. I love this stuff.
Yeah, just really great. And again, thanks, Mark, for being here. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this show up.
And
I'll catch up with you in just a minute.
We'll see you all real soon, especially next month for our two great books. Take care. Thanks for being with us.
Excellent. All right, everybody. There we go. Good thing that little interruption wasn't too big and too long. But again, thank you to Thor for his great book, Triumph of Seeds. Definitely check out the link below in the description so that you can go and get yourself a copy. Also, look forward to our books, Plants to the Rescue, 4th Sunday next month. And 3rd Sunday, we're going to have See Marcus Grow. So again, some more great books and talking about kids and garden education coming up in this next month as well too. I look forward to seeing all of you guys coming up here for this next week's shows as well too. So I hope to see all of you coming up here, and thank you for joining with us here today. I'll see all of you guys this next week.
Power out.